Charlie Munger would always say invert, always invert. So I'm going to take that mental model and apply it to the thinking of retirement. So what are the 7 things you could do to make sure you have the most miserable retirement possible? Hi, I'm Zach Lundak and I'm an hourly financial planner. Okay, step 1 to have a miserable retirement. Avoid cultivating interests outside of work. Picture this, you spent 20, 30, maybe 40 years climbing the corporate ladder. Each promotion felt like validation and each raise was like progress, but here is the uncomfortable truth that no one talks about. Every ladder has its top rung, and when you reach it, you realize there's nowhere left to go, something profound happens. The structure that defined your days, your sense of purpose, and your identity, it all starts to crumble. You wake up for the first time in a long time and you don't have a clear next step. There's no promotion to chase, no new skill to learn to get the next level up, no mountain left to climb in your professional journey. This is where the real danger begins. When you've built your entire sense of self around your career, retirement and reaching the peak doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like falling into a void. Nature hates a vacuum. So without meaningful pursuits that fill that space and without passions that you've nurtured along the way, your mind is going to find something else to obsess over. Suddenly you're lying awake late at night worried about things totally out of your control. You might check on the news obsessively. You might get worked up over political situations just to give anything your achievement-oriented mind something to aim at. So this is why discovering and nurturing hobbies along the way during your career is critical. It's not just a nice to have. You really have to think about this before stepping into retirement. Okay, step 2 to have a miserable retirement. Fretting over things you can't control. If you start the day off with a cup of coffee and catastrophe on your phone or just watching TV on the news, you're going to have a bad day. Every market fluctuation becomes a personal crisis. Is inflation going to ruin my savings? What if the next recession is coming? Is Social Security going to go bankrupt? This will lead you to refresh your Fidelity or Schwab app constantly and just watch numbers bounce around all day. So the 24-hour news cycle has become your new boss, and it is much more demanding than the old boss that you had. That old boss, at least when you were working, you had weekends and vacation days, but financial anxiety and political outrage never go off the clock. Here's what makes this particularly dangerous is when you had a demanding career, maybe you glanced at headlines in between meetings or when you got off of work. Now you have unlimited time to do a deep dive into every economic prediction, political controversy, and expert analysis on everything that is falling apart in the world. A minor market correction that you would have barely noticed during your working years now feels like a personal attack on your future security. This constant state of worry doesn't just steal your peace, but it also destroys your judgment. So when you're operating from a place of fear and anxiety, you tend to make pretty bad financial decisions. Step 3 to have a miserable retirement. Manage your portfolio without an investment policy statement. A lot of retirees spend more time researching their next vacation spot than creating a coherent investment strategy. Without an investment policy statement, you are more likely to get blown around by trends and suffer from fear of missing out or FOMO than other people. So picture this scenario. It's Monday morning, you're having a coffee, you see a headline. Tech stocks are soaring. By Tuesday, you're moving money into the hot AI fund. Thursday comes around and there's a banking crisis. So you panic and you shift everything into bonds. Next week, your neighbor mentions that he's made a lot in gold this year. So let's allocate some over there. Without a written investment plan, you are at a much higher risk of being influenced by headlines or emotional decision-making factors, not a solid plan that's going to ensure you have the best chance of reaching your goals. This investment whiplash, it's the perfect recipe to destroy your wealth while feel like you're being active and engaged with your money. When you don't have your own clear strategy, it's easy to compare your performance against another person's. And that comparison game is a total trap because people often tell you their wins, but they don't tell you their losses. So you are measuring against a false measuring stick, and it can leave you feeling very disappointed. So think of your IPS as your investment constitution. It's a document that outlines your goals, your risk tolerance, your time horizon, and specific guidelines for how you're going to conduct the management of your portfolio. Things like, what's your target asset allocation between stocks, bonds, and other investments? When are you going to rebalance your portfolio? What will trigger you to change your mind? How much risk can you actually stomach during market downturns? And what is your withdrawal strategy? By having this document, it becomes like a filter for every decision that you have to make in relation to your investments. And it can help you filter out a lot of this noise that you're being inundated with on a daily basis. So stop treating the portfolio management like a hobby. Create a written plan and a document that is strong and solid and one that you can turn to when things get difficult. Step 4 to have a miserable retirement. Wait until you are 80 to go on adventures. This is the difference between health span and lifespan. The cruel irony that catches a lot of retirees off guard is you spend your entire career postponing adventures, telling yourself, oh, I'll do that when I retire. Then retirement rolls around and you spend the first decade of it still postponing. You'll say, oh, once we get more settled in retirement, then we can do that trip. Then we can take that adventure. Then we can do that, whatever we want to do. It's time for a health span reality check. The brutal, honest truth is that some things have a shelf life. And if you don't get those things crossed off your list, you are just not going to do them. If you wait until your 70s or 80s to take a backpack trip to Europe, that is going to be a pretty miserable experience. The reality is that your peak adventure years are typically in your 60s and early 70s. After that, your body will start slowing down. To put this in perspective, think about your energy levels now versus what they were 10 years ago. So if you can feel that difference, think about what you're going to feel like in the next 10 years. So the solution here is pretty counterintuitive. Everything we've been taught about retirement is delay, delay, delay. But when it comes to checking some of these things off that are really important to you, you've got to front load them in retirement. It doesn't mean being reckless with your spending, but it is about prioritizing what are you going to do and what order are you going to do them in. Step 5 to have a miserable retirement. Spend all of your investment earnings if you have gains in the early years of retirement. I've seen this firsthand, and this is brutal. So imagine this. You retire, and the market just goes crazy for a few years. Your first early years in retirement. This is when you're taking a lot of adventures, you're taking a lot of money out of your accounts, but you just see them keep going up and up and up. It is easy to fall into the trap of spending all those gains, but it is a huge mistake because you're setting yourself up for a lot of pain in the coming years as you get back to a more normal environment. This gets back to our early conversation about having an IPS, have a spending plan, and stick with it. If you fall in that trap of inflating expenses, your lifestyle is going to inflate, and it's going to be very difficult to scale that back. Step 6 to make sure you have a miserable retirement. Take more risk than you can handle. Everyone is very brave when they answer risk tolerance questionnaires that their advisor asks them. However, you have to put yourself in the situation and really feel this to understand it. When you are close to retirement and your retirement accounts have millions of dollars in them, even small changes in the market value can be equal to years of your income at your job. It is a horrifying thing to see your accounts down 6 figures or 7 figures. If you haven't experienced this before, you have to really be careful about this because when you have that happen, you are much, much more likely to make a rash decision that you will regret later. Try to guard yourself against that by not taking too much risk in your portfolio. So step 7 to have a miserable retirement is completely ignore inflation. On the flip side of taking too much risk is you might think, hey, let me just put everything in cash or bonds or tips. And while that might be safe in the short term, longer term, this is very dangerous because your wealth will be eroded by inflation over time. That has come to the forefront in recent years after the pandemic. However, I still see this as a problem where people think they're being safe and conservative, but really they might be foregoing generational wealth that they could be passing on to their families by taking such little risk. So make sure to not avoid inflation by not having any risk or just a slight amount of risk in your portfolio. Well, there you have it. 7 ways to make sure you have a miserable retirement. If any of this resonated, please let me know in the comments section below. I'll be happy to get back to you. Please like and subscribe if you want more retirement planning content. And thanks for watching.